Thank you so much for joining us at our 2025 colloquium. My name is Yvonne Suco, and I am the Interim Executive Director at Building One Community. We're humble and deeply grateful for your presence here tonight. Your commitment and your support to our mission means more than our words can ever express. I want to give a special thank you to those whose generosity made tonight possible. That is our sponsors and our corporate sponsors. So Stanford Health, Mary Lynch, Members Credit Union, Mercy Learning Center, and Stanford Bank and Trust. Big applause for you. To the co-chairs of our events committee and volunteers, your dedication shines in every detail tonight. And also, I want to recognize our development team and our collaborators, Anka Badurina, Elena Perez, and Don Strait, who will have been presenting this program for you, preparing this program, and the success of it is evident. I also want to thank the many partners we have in the room, especially those that we have worked with very closely this year. Thank you. I want to actually acknowledge special friends from the Connecticut Immigrant Support Network, Tabitha Sodico, Luis Luna, and Catalina Horak. Their unwavering efforts are bringing real solutions to challenges that often feel impossible. I have had the privilege to be part of that group for a year, and I have to say that I have seen firsthand the extraordinary dedication they bring to this work. And of course, to all our board of directors, our board alumni, and our staff, you are the backbone of B1C. You ensure that we continue adapting and responding to challenges as they arise. So, my husband often tells me that I should smile more when I give speeches. He says when I smile, other people smile, and he's right, I have a big smile, but tonight, I have to admit, my smile is a little difficult to find. This year has been a difficult one, and I know many of you understand why. Every day, immigrant families in our community are facing struggles that most of us can hardly imagine. They contribute tirelessly, but they remain excluded from stability in living with fear of separation. This is more than individual hardship. It is a systematic barrier, one that impedes advancement in ways those born and raised here may never fully understand. No matter how good, honest, hardworking, and law-abiding these individuals are, there are simple no pathways to the dream they seek, because our country has yet to figure out how to provide opportunity in a meaningful and accessible way. And yet, alongside those struggles, we see extraordinary resilience. The same determination that brought families here is the same spirit that inspires hope. It shows up in the parent that puts their child's future first. It shows up in the neighbors who have little but give anyway, and in the community members who continue to believe in tomorrow. At B1C, we meet families where they are, whether it is with urgent needs like food, health access, legal guidance, or longer-term goals like education and stability. These are sensitive times, and we know that sometimes the most powerful work is done quietly with dignity and respect. But make no mistake, our work is a lot more than just addressing today's needs. It's about helping parents who sacrifice so their children can rise, about ensuring the next generation has the opportunities to lead and strengthen our nation. At B1C, we balance hope and despair, progress and setbacks, but always with the conviction to move forward. The Migration Policy Institute, coordinating with the Connecticut Project, has conducted an important study of ways in which key state policies and services meet the needs of low-income immigrants and their children, and how they might more effectively do so. Today, as you hear the findings of the MPI study, I want you to keep in mind a few words: hope, resilience, hard work, optimism, community, family, and love. These are not just ideals. They are the foundation upon our collective immigrant community is built. They are the values that we hold deeply at B1C. And they are reflected in the stories, the data, and the lived experiences that you will hear about tonight. Thank you for being here and helping us build one community. Now I'd like to introduce Mirellise Vazquez, our moderator. She is the Vice President of Investment at the Connecticut Project, where she leads philanthropic strategy, stakeholder engagement, and grant-making efforts. She brings 20 years of experience in policy, advocacy, and philanthropy across public and nonprofit sectors. Previously, she served as the executive director of the Tuck Family Foundation and held leadership roles in several international nonprofits. Mirellise began her career at the US Department of Labor, focusing on international child labor and education programs. She was a long-time B1C member, including serving as a board vice chair. Mirellise will take us through the important highlights of the MPI report. Thank you, Mirellise. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. It's a wonderful to be with you. Before we get started, a huge thanks to Yvonne and the entire B1C team for their tireless efforts over not just today, but the past 14 years, and in this specific moment to ensure that everyone, including Fairfield County's immigrant communities, have the opportunity to thrive and live fulfilling lives. That is what we are here to discuss today, and I am grateful to B1C for choosing this topic for this year's colloquium and inviting me to be part of the conversation. Let's start with a little background. As Yvonne mentioned, I am with the Connecticut Project. We bring together people, ideas, and resources to build opportunity, and a Connecticut that works for working class people. As the organization got up and running in 2022, and to inform what priority areas and strategies we would deploy, we set a goal to speak to as many stakeholders across the state on the most pressing needs facing low-income and asset-limited people. Part of this outreach included speaking with immigrant serving and advocacy groups who shared with us that the specific needs of immigrants are often overlooked in direct service programs and state policies, and that more data and information was needed in order to inform program and policy efforts. Learning from the Immigrant Community Needs Assessment conducted by B1C for Stanford in 2018, we reached out to Anca Bandurina for thought partnership on a potential study for the entire state of Connecticut, and who could be a national partner in such an effort. We are thrilled to have been able to commission the Migration Policy Institute to author the study titled All In for Connecticut's Future: Opportunities to Support Economic Mobility for the State's Immigrant Families. The report, which launched yesterday, consists of program and policy recommendations across 8 key areas, including workforce development, early childhood education, and immigration legal services. Guided by a statewide advisory group with members from across each of these key areas, many of whom are here today, so if you could please stand. Those of you who have been involved with the report, including Ellen and Catalina and Sarah Rendon and Anca and who else is here? Luis, Luna, and all of the folks. Am I missing anybody? Thank you. We are proud to be in conversation with you tonight on the study's important findings. However, the work of developing this report began a year and a half ago. Therefore, while some of the recommendations are in response to current federal policies, others aim to address long-standing issues in Connecticut that precede the current administration. Regardless, I hope the findings and recommendations you hear about tonight are informative and will motivate us all into action. Before we get started, I want to invite all of the audience members to write your questions on the cards placed on your seats throughout the duration of the panel discussion. You can lift them up and pass them to the B1C staff, who will take them, review them, organize them, and hand them over to me ahead of the Q&A portion of the evening. So everyone knows what to do? You know where your cards are? There's pens? Okay, great. So with that, I'd like to now introduce our esteemed panelists, each with significant experience and expertise in issues highlighted in the study. So first is Julia Gelatt, Associate Director of the U.S. Immigration Policy Program at the Migration Policy Institute. She is also the co-lead on this study. Her work at MPI focuses on the legal immigration system, demographic trends, and the implications of local, state, and federal U.S. immigration policy. Without Julia's genius, leadership, and thoughtfulness, this report would not have been possible. Next, I'd like to introduce Stamford native and successful business owner and entrepreneur David Cingari, Culinary Director for the Cingari Family Markets, Vice Chair of the Stamford Chamber of Commerce, active supporter and board member of several local community organizations, including the Stamford Hospital Foundation and the First County Bank Corporation, and a longtime friend and partner to B1C's workforce and culinary programs. And it is my sincere pleasure to introduce my state senator, Ceci Maher, a Stamford native, in case you didn't know that, and staunch advocate for children. Ceci currently serves as chair of the Senate's Children's Committee and also as vice chair of the Human Services Committee. Prior to joining state service, Ceci ran Sandy Hook Promise and Person to Person, and has firsthand experience with the needs facing our most vulnerable, including immigrant communities. She was also an integral part of B1C's initial planning efforts 16 years ago now, and is a longtime friend of the organization. So we're gonna get started. I'd like to invite Julia to share with us a quick overview of the study, including major takeaways and recommendations on some of the key areas that we're gonna talk about today.
Thank you, Mirellise. Thank you, Mirellise, and thank you so much to B1C for allowing us this opportunity to share a report with all of you. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you to the Connecticut Project for supporting us in doing this work. It's truly been a pleasure to speak to so many thoughtful, caring, smart people across Connecticut who are working to support immigrant families. This has been one of my favorite projects to work on in what's become sort of a difficult time to work on immigration, but it's been really inspiring. This is a project that I co-led with MPI's Margie McHugh. She leads our National Center on Immigrant Integration Policy. She's a force of nature. I hope many of you will be in touch with her as we work towards some of the recommendations in the report and hopefully making them a reality. So our report focused on supporting the upward mobility of low-income immigrant families in Connecticut. That was our charge from TCP. But I do want to acknowledge that many immigrants in Connecticut are doing very well, and all immigrants in Connecticut are contributing to the state. I'm going to tell you about some problems, but first I want to tell you that 2 in 5 immigrants have a bachelor's or higher degree in Connecticut. 60% of immigrants speak English very well, if not fluently. Immigrants work at higher rates than the US-born population. Immigrants pay billions of dollars into state and local taxes here in Connecticut, and immigrants have driven all of the growth in the Connecticut workforce over the past decade plus. But like all families, immigrant families sometimes need extra support. And immigrants benefit from support in their early years in the United States, as all of you know, as they get integrated into their communities, into schools, into their workplaces. So in this report, to do this report, we interviewed dozens of people across the state, including some of you in this room. We talked with service providers, we talked with stakeholders, we talked with experts, community leaders, members of the state government, and we had the opportunity to hear about all kinds of efforts and also all kinds of challenges in Connecticut. We also reviewed Connecticut's policies and practices, and we conducted a data profile using Census Bureau data. So we have a data profile of immigrants in Connecticut and immigrant parents in Connecticut as well. Mirellise mentioned we had a wonderful advisory board that also supported us. We give them credit for all their good ideas and guidance, and we take full responsibility for any missteps or mistakes you might find in our report. Mirellise mentioned we looked at 8 policy domains. Those are all listed in the handout that you all have on your seat, which gives a little overview of the report. So at the very top of that handout, you'll see the 8 policy domains. At the very bottom of the second page, you'll see a link to the full report. We really hope that you'll check that out. We'll get into some of the topics covered in the report in more depth tonight, but I wanted to touch briefly on a couple of broader themes that emerged across our 8 areas of focus. So one of them is that Connecticut has good policies in place in many areas, has a lot of good intention and a lot of goodwill towards immigrants, but many of the supportive services are more available in certain parts of the state than others, and many rely on the initiative and leadership of good-hearted people, like many of you in this room, but operate without state funding, with sometimes too limited private support, and often rely on volunteers who are wonderful, but also have other things to do. Therefore, these sometimes fragile efforts would benefit from not just more funding, ideally state investments, but also more state-level guidance, coordination, and support. The pieces are there, but they need more fabric under them to support them and strengthen them. One example comes from the K through 12 education system. Connecticut has a lot of forward-looking policies in this area. There's the bilingual education mandate for certain students. There's state funding for bilingual education. There's the Parents' Bill of Rights for English learners and multilingual learners. The Connecticut Department of Education has guides for schools and districts on how to implement programming for English learners, but not all schools are able to deliver on the promise that the state provides. There aren't enough educators in the state with training in bilingual education because there aren't enough higher education programs to educate those educators. And the state made the mandate for bilingual education, but never fully developed the implementation plan that helped all of the districts across the whole state to implement that promise. So there is good programming that exists, but it relies on the initiative and the hard work of really wonderful, hardworking individual school leaders and educators. But there's more that could be done to strengthen the workforce of people who have strong training in English learning, educating English learners, and building a stronger focus into the fabric of the K through 12 education system with a focus on children of immigrants. Another example of this is protections for low-wage workers. Connecticut has done a lot and passed a lot of good policies for low-wage workers, raised the minimum wage, pegged the minimum wage to essentially inflation, mandated paid sick leave, expanded the rights of home health care aides, and funded some nonprofits to educate those home health care aides about their rights. But abuses of workers, particularly immigrants who don't know their rights or don't have a firm legal status that allows them to feel safe in asserting those rights, are still too common. There are abuses in terms of lack of safety training and equipment, wage and hour violations. Lots of hardworking people across the state are working to address this. But at the state level, the Department of Labor has seen declining numbers of inspectors. There's a growing backlog of cases that haven't been investigated, and there's a need for more state support to fund more inspections, to focus those inspections on industries and employers where violations are known to occur. There's more the Attorney General's office could do if it was interested in civil prosecutions of labor law violations to improve the working conditions of everyone. A second key challenge that emerged across some of the policy domains that we looked at, of course, is all of the changes happening at the federal level. Changes in policy, threats to funding that Congress appropriated, coming threats to future funding, and this will present all kinds of choices for Connecticut. One area where this was really clear is in health policy. Of course, we just saw a lot of changes to who is eligible for Medicaid, to how people can show their eligibility for Medicaid, to federal funding for health insurance, especially emergency Medicaid. Connecticut made a big commitment in expanding Husky to children aged 0 to 15, regardless of immigration status, but it's going to face some big questions ahead in how to sustain those commitments and what future commitments it can make to ensure that immigrants can access health insurance and health care, especially with changes to who's eligible potentially for community health centers and other challenges. Amid this overall federal erosion in support for immigrants, there's real opportunity for Connecticut. Connecticut has the opportunity to present a different vision of the role that immigrants can play in US communities. Rather than seeing immigrants as a threat, Connecticut can show the rest of the country that we can see immigrants as a resource, and that investing in immigrant families can support everyone, particularly in a state where 30% of kids live in immigrant families, and where immigrants and their kids are really driving the growth of the state. I encourage you to check out the full report. Again, there's a link on the second page of your handout. We hope that many of the recommendations in our report can help in building an even stronger focus in Connecticut and a more statewide sustained focus on supporting immigrants' families to fully contribute.
Thanks, Julia. That's awesome. All right. So now we're going to dig into workforce development. So as we all know, immigrants play a vital role in Connecticut's workforce and economy. We all live this and see it every day. Recent data shows that immigrants make up 15% of the state's population, but hold about 20% of all jobs. Immigrant workers are critical to sectors like construction, agriculture, healthcare, and early childhood education, and also account for 26% of the state's entrepreneurs. And immigrant-led households in Connecticut wield approximately $22 billion, with a B, in spending power, which supports businesses and jobs across the state. At the same time, the MPI study highlighted the many needs facing Connecticut's immigrant workforce, including occupational issues such as wage theft, unsafe or hazardous working conditions, and unpredictable or varying schedules, limited English fluency, professional English skills and digital literacy, and significant barriers to participation in relevant workforce programs. David, can you share with us a little bit about how your companies have worked with immigrant employees over the years and how you've partnered with B1C and their programs addressing many of these needs, particularly their workforce development and English language learning programs?
Sure. Well, a lot has happened. Well, I'm sorry. Guess I grabbed this. A lot has changed over the last 35 years that I have had a business or been involved in business. And I think one stat that should be in there is in the food service, restaurant, hospitality, it's about 90% staffed by immigrants, unquestionably. Early on, with my own business, it wasn't too tough to hire who I wanted. I really just needed to look at some paperwork, and if it looked good to me, it was all good. So I hired people. As the years have progressed, that has drastically changed, and in the last few years, it's absolutely impossible to hire anyone that is not completely legal and has totally clean papers. We have to do background checks. I'm with a very large company now. Wakefern is our parent company, even though we're an independent market, but we have to do background checks on every single person that works. About 18 years ago, I had federal agents surround my 6,000 square foot kitchen and came in. Luckily, the Stamford police were very nice. I knew a lot of them, and they came in and let me know what was happening before. But they took away my number one person, Henry Alex Rosales, who married, owned a home, 3 kids in school in Stanford, the best, spoke English perfectly, nicest guy in the world. And I guess he had a bench warrant from whenever, gone. He was gone, never, I shouldn't say never to return. So we ended up, through some friends, getting him a job down in Honduras. 19 years later, last year, through a lot of paperwork with his kids, he returned back and he's working for us again. So. It was a very emotional reunion. Still, incredible guy, incredible worker, and he's risen to the top of a company that he hasn't been involved with in 18 years, so it's really, really nice. But that change from not being able to hire anyone anymore, I have knocks on my door. I have people that work for me that have relatives, friends coming over that want work that we can't hire. And I have people that work for me that are scared and crying and nervous about family members that they have that are living with them on what might happen. And it's not real great to watch. From a workforce development perspective, I don't know how long it was ago, Anka, 15 years plus, when you and Carolina came and asked about, if you were to put a culinary program together, what would it look like? What would they need to know? What are some good things? We talked about English terms for a lot of the equipment in the kitchens, how they should dress, how they should report to work, things like that, food safety, sanitation. We ended up working with the Stanford Health Department, who was fantastic, allowing them to get a Serve Safe certification. And then at the end of the program, they came to us and worked in one of our cafes for a week or two and did kind of a roundsman. They worked at dishwashing and prepping and grilling and saw what it really was like to work in a kitchen on a daily basis to see if it's what they wanted to do. So it was kind of nice to see that program start, and I know it's still going on. Nanny or Nana, whatever her name was, that was making the shrimp tacos, she's a graduate of the culinary program, right? And she's got her own catering company now, so if anyone needs anything, go see her, because the shrimp taquitos were actually very, very good. I think that's all I got on that one.
Great, awesome, thanks, David. So follow-up question. Coupled with the issues highlighted in the study, we've seen in recent job reports from the Connecticut Department of Labor that Connecticut's labor force decreased by 3,700 people in June and 2,500 in July, in part likely due to federal immigration policies. What challenges are you and other employers, aside from the ones you mentioned, currently facing in hiring generally and supporting immigrant workers?
Yeah, I still, know everyone in the restaurant industry in town and around. Everyone's talking about the same thing on how difficult it is, how scared they are if they may have someone that is not fully legal. Like I said, I have people knocking on my door. I have relatives looking for work. I try and call friends to see if we can get them placed somewhere, but I can't find enough people to fill the jobs that we have because they are entry-level jobs, right? It's production. You're working in a kitchen. There's not a whole lot of people that want to do this job, yet the people that really want to do the job and are excellent at it, I can't hire. And a lot of us can't hire. The fear factor in general is rampant. So much that I was questioned on whether I should actually speak here tonight by some people in my company because they were worried what that might mean for our company. But it's that bad. It's that bad out there, and unfortunately, I wish it wasn't the case because it would make my job a lot easier.
Thanks, David. We appreciate you. Sure. This is a question for Julia and David. As you both know, workforce development has been and will likely continue to be a big focus of our state, particularly as we have more open jobs than people to fill them. What advice do you have for us on how to make sure the state's workforce development efforts meet the needs of both immigrants and employers?
I can start. So in talking with people in Connecticut who are doing workforce development programming and adult education, I think a couple of themes emerged. One was that in the adult education system, which is a system that helps immigrants learn English and also get their high school equivalency, there's the public program, and then there's the nonprofit service providers like B1C that are often working with volunteers. Some of the higher needs individuals, those who have less English fluency and less of an educational background, are the ones that are seeking out help from nonprofits, whereas some of those with a stronger foundation are accessing the public system. But there is more funding for professional staff in the public system versus volunteers in the nonprofit system. So making sure that there's enough funding to support the hard work of organizations that are helping the immigrants who really need that leg up the most is one recommendation. The other is exactly what you just heard about, is making sure that adult education and workforce training programs understand what employers in Connecticut want, and that those programs are offering those skills so that immigrants can really then go out and find a job, having obtained the skills that they need. And something else that you just heard about, which is contextualized English. So not just learning English in a classroom to memorize some words, but learning English in the context where you might use it, what you might need to say in a production facility, in a restaurant, in a hotel, that can really help immigrants prepare themselves for the workforce. There are also big changes ahead in federal funding and rules around adult education and workforce development. That's of course a challenge, but it is also an opportunity for Connecticut to think about how much it wants to work on programming that comes with a federal match, but comes with a lot of federal rules, versus investing in programming that Connecticut can be fully in control of with Connecticut money only, where there might be room for some innovation to focus on workforce development and education, but also in a two-generation model where immigrant parents can learn for themselves, but also learn how to support their kids in their education as well. So a few different ideas that came out of all of the smart things that people in Connecticut told us.
I'm sorry, I wrote all those answers for you. Now I don't have
That was
anything to
perfect.
say.
That was perfect.
Wow. Ditto. Right. I can't even think of anything else to say other than that, because the workforce development piece is absolutely critical. We talked about in one conversation about chambers of commerce, right?
That was the next question.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that the next?
That is. I'm happy to ask you that one. All right, yeah. Tell us.
So in just segueing into that, if we could get together with the chambers of commerce who could talk to the businesses in town and find out exactly what they're looking for from a workforce and what they would need, we'd be able to, monitor or drive the training to what's actually necessary out there. You did it for the culinary program. I don't know if you did it for landscaping or whatever the, starting jobs would be. But it's what to look like, when you show up. Showing up early, being on time, a few minutes early, never late, dressed and clean, and the basic skills that some people just don't have, right? They don't think that it's necessary to show up for work like that. And yeah, I don't know if we're going to get any more funding, but if that would be a possibility, that would really help out a lot.
As we all look at Ceci.
Ceci.
Thanks, David. So any additional questions on workforce, please take this moment to get your card, write them down. Folks will come around and pick them up, and we will answer them in the Q&A portion. So now we're going to shift to early childhood education. This year, the General Assembly approved Governor Lamont's proposal to create a $300 million early childhood education endowment, projected to support the creation of approximately 16,000 additional infant, toddler, and preschool seats in Connecticut by 2030, with families earning less than $100,000 annually and enrolled in Smart Start programs receiving free childcare. Other strategies recommended by the Blue Ribbon Panel on Childcare also passed, including legislation to strengthen the childcare workforce. Ceci, first, congratulations on these once-in-a-generation legislative wins. As the state implements the endowment and other recently passed early childhood legislation, where do you see the opportunities for attention to specific issues facing immigrant communities highlighted in the report?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me tonight, but also for all the work you do, because I know how, from my experience with Person to Person, that immigrants are the fabric of our community, that they come, they work hard, they create for their children and their families, and it's just heartbreaking what's happening right now. So, on the early childhood endowment, I have to tell you how it came to be in terms of my experience with it in the legislative session right now. So many of the childcare workers who were immigrants, who were Spanish speaking, who worked so hard and were not getting paid rates that could sustain them, had no health care, facilities that they didn't have any money to increase the number of children that they saw. They were the strongest advocates for this bill. They were incredible, up there all the time, talking to legislators, being present, and they really lifted us all up as we did this work. I think that the in-home childcare is only about 10%, believe it or not, of childcare in Connecticut. And the rest is childcare centers and then the entrepreneurial model. So the idea here with the childcare endowment is to make sure that we are, and let me just give you a caveat. I'm going to be one of the tri-chairs of the Children Endowment Advisory Committee. And in the past week, I've been calling up everyone who's involved in this work and saying to them, I am a neophyte. Explain to me how childcare works. And even tonight, when I was talking with Monica from CLC, every single person I talk to has a different window, a different lens, a different component of how they see childcare. So this past week has been a really deep learning process for me. And what I see is we did pass, and I'm only trying to give you the reality of the situation. We did pass this. We are going to work on this. And if you can think of like 6 buckets on a table, first we're going to help with childcare providers and bring them up to speed in terms of pay, and that's going to take time. We're going to build more childcare facilities. There's bonding money to increase childcare facilities. Then we are going to help with health care for childcare providers, because we know they're on the ground with the kids. If anybody's a grandparent or a parent and they've gotten all those illnesses that come home with your kids and the parents are always sick, well, the childcare providers get those illnesses too, and they have no health care, and they still have to work. So we want to provide that. So education, insurance, increased pay, facility upgrades. So when you think about all this, and that even still is not going to be enough to make sure that we have childcare across our state. And when I say that, and I'm not trying to be a downer here, I just want to tell you how big the climb is up the mountain. The good news is that our governor is very committed to this. The Blue Ribbon Panel did an incredible job of setting the stage. The advocates were there to support the work. The Connecticut project was a significant funder in this, getting this to where we are now. And the other piece of information is that every single year we will grow this child care endowment. This is not going to be a one-off $300 million this year and then never again. The expectation is every single year we will put more money in. And on a different basis every year, we'll take a certain percentage out. And that will build the Office of Early Childcare, and it will start flowing through to providers. But the expectation is it's all going to happen soon, and it's not. It'll take a year or two to really start to see this process. So I'm sorry, I completely forgot the question.
No, it's okay. Where do you see opportunities for immigrant families?
Okay, so where I see opportunities for immigrant families is obviously the same providers that I was speaking of, but also the opportunity for education, the opportunity to, I had one mom come up to me and she was crying and hugging me and telling me that because we are going to do this with the child care providers, in-home child care providers, that she can now bring her child here and can include her child in a child care facility. And so where do I see? I mean, there's opportunity. That is the biggest thing, is there is going to be opportunity. So the education piece is really, really important. But when we start to float all boats by pay scales and by making sure people are healthy and helping people who are running in-home childcare get funding to increase and upgrade their in-home childcare and also the centers. So there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity because we know how hard immigrant communities work, and we know that they will find a pathway in and through, and they'll be supported in that.
Thanks, Ceci. Julia, how can we make sure dual and multi-language learning is supported effectively?
Thanks, Mirellise. I was going to start by saying exactly what you just said, that the early care and education system is a whole lot of systems. Please do check out our full report. If you check out the section on early childhood education and care, you'll see it's the very longest, and that's because it's trying to cover childcare and preschool and pre-K and Head Start and childcare subsidies, early voluntary home visiting and birth to 3 programming for families where kids have developmental delays or disabilities. There's so many parts to this system, it's really complicated, and there are a lot of challenges and a lot of recommendations that we have. But just to give a few, I mean, supply is just the underlying problem for all families with kids. There's just not enough affordable childcare, and it's great to hear how Connecticut is working on that. For some of the more specialized services, the voluntary home visiting, which sends social workers into homes for the birth to 3 programming, not enough immigrants get linked in. The eligibility criteria aren't specified for immigrants, although some of the other criteria tend to align with immigrant family characteristics, but it's not clear that those are reaching the immigrant families that could really benefit from those programs. But a big challenge on dual language learners is just identifying dual language learners. So those are kids who are learning their home language and learning English at the same time. So much of early brain development hinges on language, and dual language learners are learning in a different way because their brains are wired into 2 languages. So providers can best support them if they're aware of who is a dual language learner, and they understand that sometimes those dual language learners might look a little slower on other indicators, but they're about to rocket ahead of their peers. So expanding how the state across its programs identifies dual language learners is one thing that could help, and the state could start with Early Start Connecticut, its new initiative. Extending the bilingual education requirement that exists in the K-12 system to 4-year-olds in public preschool is another opportunity. Expanding training both for educators and also for parents through multilingual informational campaigns about how they can support dual language learners could help. And building more diversity in the early care and education staff by helping people from immigrant backgrounds get into the field, either through scholarships to help those who want to study in this area, recognizing foreign credentials so that immigrant workers who have worked in early care and education abroad can bring those skills here into the United States. And then finally, Ceci, you also mentioned doing more to help family child care providers to get up to speed on the requirements. Immigrant families rely heavily on in-home care providers in their communities. Those are trusted providers who often come from the same background, but it can be hard for those providers to meet all of the requirements that we place on them. So helping them to get up to speed could really help to expand the availability of care and also immigrant trust in early care and education.
Thanks, Julia. It was like reading the report all over again. I love it. Definitely encourage everyone to read the early childhood chapter. Ceci, would you like to add anything on what Julia started talking about what we can do to ensure that programs are expanded in communities with high need for additional childcare seats, such as Stanford, and that home visiting, birth to 3, and family support programs are expanded?
Well, certainly on the Smart Start and Early Start, which are based on income levels, they do exist in the communities where the highest level of immigrant population is. And so that's, the funding is automatically going to go there, so that is actually really a good thing. Where we see, and I know this isn't relevant to here, but where we see the childcare deserts tend to be in eastern Connecticut, where there are far less immigrant people. So I do think that the funding from Early Start and Smart Start will make a significant difference in the communities now. And in a way that means that they're more poised to take advantage of what is going to be coming.
Thanks, Ceci. Again, would like to invite everyone, any questions on early childhood, take this time to write them down on the cards. Bring your card up and someone will get them. And we are going to shift now to immigration legal services. Hot topic. So with that, as we all know, the United States has a very, very complex legal immigration system, one that is very challenging to navigate regardless of your status. With changes happening almost daily to current federal immigration policies, the process is now even more complicated and costly. And there are not enough immigration attorneys to meet current demand for services, including for increasingly urgent removal defense cases as deportations accelerate. In Connecticut, affordable legal services are primarily provided by less than a dozen nonprofits, including Building One Community. Julia, while efforts are underway to meet the legal needs of immigrants in the current political environment, the reality of the situation is that it would take millions of dollars and immense human power to do so. Can you share with us examples of what other states have done to support immigration legal services? And what advice do you have for Connecticut policymakers in supporting immigrant legal services?
This is a really daunting question. In this environment, the needs are immense. And as you mentioned, Mirellise, there will never be enough money and enough immigration attorneys for every person in Connecticut without firm legal status to have individual high-quality representation, even though that, of course, would be the goal. As you mentioned, Connecticut has a strong network of legal service providers, but there aren't enough attorneys to do removal defense to help people who are in removal proceedings in immigration court. There are some structural challenges here. Connecticut is nestled between some markets where the pay is higher and smart law school graduates can earn more money if they do immigrant legal services in New York or Boston. That's one challenge. The other challenge is that this is just really difficult, stressful, exhausting, demoralizing work. The stakes are so high and the rules are changing every day, and it feels like fighting a broken system. People get burnt out. Part of what other states have done is invest sizable amounts of money and make state-level commitments to supporting immigrant legal services. There are now at least 11 states that have put state money into funding legal services. Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, and Washington have funded access to counsel for immigrants in removal proceedings through appropriations. And California, Colorado, and Oregon have passed bills that establish the state's commitment to funding immigrant legal services. Massachusetts joined the set of states that funds immigrant legal services just this year. These state funding levels range anywhere from hundreds of thousands of dollars to tens of millions of dollars. So the commitments, the structure, the amounts, they all vary. The more money, of course, the more lawyers and the more clients served. But because the money will never be enough, it's also important to invest in smart ways. So one of those ways is just having flexible funding. We talked with some immigrant legal service providers in Connecticut, attorneys, who said that they didn't have any support staff. And so they were spending some of their valuable hours doing pretty simple paperwork. They were hoping for funders who would fund them for what they needed, which was more paralegals, more DOJ accredited representatives, more social workers, other kinds of support that would help the money go further. Also, it's just going to be necessary to have models that go beyond having one attorney for one client. This can take a whole bunch of different forms, and none of it is ideal, but self-representation clinics, especially for clients who have some English fluency and education and have a case where it might be feasible to represent themselves with some support, or drawing on law school clinics, as I know Connecticut does, and non-immigration attorneys who are seeking pro bono hours. There can also be economies of scale of legal service providers cooperating, and I know this happens, on banks of country conditions reports for asylum, establishing relationships with social work schools to have them help with affidavits from clients. And then I know that Connecticut is also doing a lot of the kind of organizing work that can help families who can't find legal representation or don't have the money, which is know your rights work, getting ready, knowing what the plan is, should somebody encounter ICE, what the family plan is if someone should be arrested or deported. So there's a big role for non-lawyers too, and for all community members to get involved in this work.
Absolutely, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But before we do that, as was noted in the report, in Connecticut, there are few organizations, I mentioned earlier, less than 12, providing immigration legal services that are free or affordable, and even fewer offering a broad range of services that include family-based, humanitarian, and removal defense cases, as does B1C. In light of the current increase in need for legal services, given the impact of federal immigration policies, I'd like to ask Renee Redmond, B1C's Immigration Legal Services Director, to join us and share some insights. So Renee, could you please share with us what you and your team are seeing on the ground, the services you're currently providing, and how you and your team are adjusting your work to meet the challenges immigrant families are dealing with right now?
Absolutely. Thank you, and thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate it. As everybody knows, and we've mentioned already, we're all living in a very stressful and unstable environment. But it's especially scary for immigrants and their families who have to make decisions, often very difficult decisions. The government changes its rules and policies on a daily basis, sometimes twice a day, because we have a lot of federal litigation, because sometimes that's the only way to preserve rights. The government also continues to push out experienced officers, USCIS officers, even experienced ICE officers, and experienced immigration judges. For example, in May, 2 of the most experienced immigration judges in the Hartford Immigration Court, the only immigration court in the state, left on 2 weeks' notice. Last week, a 3rd immigration judge in the Hartford Immigration Court left on less than 24 hours' notice. He was hearing cases one afternoon, and the next morning he was gone. We now have 1.5 judge in Hartford. So not only is it shocking to, obviously, the judges who lost their jobs, but it's also shocking to us who work in this system, because it's very disheartening, it's scary, and we always know, we never what's going to hit us next. I also want to add that the government is eliminating many of the ways that have allowed people to live and work in the United States legally. The humanitarian parole programs put in by the Biden administration have been canceled. Many of the TPS programs have been canceled. There's lots of litigation, and it's back and forth. It's, it was a happier time, you'd call it a tennis match. But in the end, most of them will not be renewed in the beginning of 2026. And of course, we know ICE is terrorizing and detaining people. The government takes the position that anybody who entered the United States without inspection at any time, 20 or 30 years ago or last year, is subject to mandatory detention, which means they are not eligible for bond. There is a lot of federal litigation around it, lawyers again, sorry, lawyers, all over the country. And some people have won, but you know how federal litigation works, it has to percolate up. So we don't know what the answer is going to be, but we do know that meanwhile people are being detained and they are not eligible for bond. Also, even when an immigration judge does grant bond, the government, not always, but generally, will appeal that order, which comes with an automatic stay of the order, which means that, again, that person will stay in detention until that appeal has wended its way, and which can take a couple of years. So to be blunt, we aren't living in business as usual. And I have to say, it will get worse. We are ready to meet the challenge, so just bring it on, right? We are devoted to working together and creatively to represent and fight for our clients. We will do what it takes. And one thing that it really takes is flexibility. So in ILS, we are building in the flexibility that enables us to respond to the needs as they arise. It is extremely difficult technical legal work, and especially not only because of the changes, but because immigration law has basically, we're still working in the 1952 Immigration Act. It's been amended and fooled with for a really long time. So it's always been complicated, it's just worse now. All applications and petitions are complicated and they take longer because of the changing laws and the lack of personnel and the chaos within the agencies. Agencies are also using their discretion to deny and challenge applications. Many applications that would have gone through smoothly 2 years ago now require more evidence, and the government challenges them. ILS is focused on preparing and filing applications for low-income persons or clients who have paths to legalize their status, because after all, the best way to avoid being removed is to have legal status in the United States. We represent people in a wide variety of areas. We represent people in removal proceedings. We prepare and file humanitarian visa applications, including asylum for people who fear persecution in their home countries. We prepare and file applications for people who are victims of domestic violence and other crimes. We prepare and file applications for children who have been abandoned by their parents, special immigrant juvenile visas. We prepare family petitions for family members who want to file for members of their families to immigrate to the United States. And we also file the adjustment application, which allows people who are already here to obtain their lawful permanent resident status. I have 1 minute, so I won't go through my whole list. And we also do naturalization, by the way. Our team is made up of lawyers, paralegals, DOJ representatives. We are very fortunate to have several very devoted volunteer lawyers, many of whom are here today, as well as a very strong staff. We also provide consultations for people before they are detained, so that they have some idea, or they know what their rights are going to be if they're detained and whether they're going to even have any kind of relief from being removed from the United States. It's much better to find that out before you're detained than after you're detained. And if nothing else, people will be informed so they can make the decision as to whether they want to pay a lawyer, right? I mean, many people will pay a lawyer. I'm sure everybody in the room is happy to pay a lawyer if it'll help them, right? But if it's not going to help them, there's no sense in throwing money at the problem. We are not able to handle people who are detained simply because people who are picked up in Connecticut are not detained in the state of Connecticut. There are no ICE detention facilities in this state. They are detained in other New England states, and these days rapidly moved out of state, off into Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. I will end just by saying this is not the time for self-help. This is the time for expert immigration assistance. All non-US citizen immigrants who are concerned about being in removal proceedings or being detained should consult with an experienced immigration lawyer to find out what their options are. And if they don't have the money to pay a private attorney, ILS is here to help provide that service. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. As Julia highlighted earlier, and as Renee also mentioned, like B1C, most of the nonprofits that offer pro bono or low bono legal services are unfortunately at capacity, given current federal immigration policy. To expand immigrant legal services, the Connecticut Immigrant Support Network is coordinating innovative state-level initiatives to ensure immigrants know and understand their rights, prepare for emergencies, and have access to new models that leverage law schools, technology, and volunteers for more accessible legal help. B1C is an active participant in these initiatives, and if anybody's interested in learning more, please see me after. Again, this is the time to take out those cards, write down any questions you may have on legal services before we move on to our last topic before our Q&A. Okay. Our next topic is an Office of New Americans. So we talked about some innovative models and potential state-level efforts. The report notes that many states across the political spectrum have built their capacities to analyze and address challenges and opportunities for immigrant integration by creating new structures within state government. One model is the Office of New Americans, which several of Connecticut's neighboring states now have. Julia, could you talk briefly about what they are and what the benefits of these Offices of New Americans are? Thank you.
Yeah, so there are 15 states that have offices of New Americans that generate a state designated focus on immigrant families within the state government. They're located in different parts of state government. They have different areas of emphasis in some cases, but they can help to create capacity within the state government to build expertise in meeting immigrant family needs and to build out a set of responses to emerging trends. They can be really helpful in facilitating responses to immigrant family needs that span across multiple state agencies. They can play that coordinating role. They can also build up the government's overall knowledge and ideas for responses, advise governors and agency leaders on immigrant issues. Maine was the latest state to develop its Office of New Americans. That office has a particular focus on workforce development, on entrepreneurs, on learning English, and on helping nonprofit organizations across the state coordinate. Another benefit of having an Office of New Americans is to help coordinate language access efforts across state agencies. So rather than each state agency having to figure out its own plan for language access, develop its own contracts for interpreters and translators, the Office of New Americans can set up statewide contracts and statewide plans and statewide policies to ensure that there's language access consistently across state agencies.
Thank you, Julia. Ceci, always putting you on the spot. From your perspective as an elected official, do you think such an office or something like it would be feasible and helpful in Connecticut's efforts to support and integrate its immigrant populations?
So I'm going to answer first as a person.
You're allowed to do that.
I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense. What we're looking for all the time is how can we develop businesses? How can we grow our workforce in Connecticut? And clearly what I have seen through the work that I've done, and certainly Julia through the report, is the importance of the immigrant population in Connecticut, what they bring to the table, what they contribute across the spectrum. And how I think that having this office would help with the coordination and integration of all the immigrants, and also putting my legislative hat on, I have to say it is very frightening right now how much money has been clawed back from the federal government or just stopped. We're looking in Medicaid payments alone in the next 10 years, $13 billion. We know that just in my district, should the ACA funding go away, 5,000 people will not be able to afford their health care because the ACA price points are going to go so high that people will not be able to pay. And those are just two things. Then we have SNAP, we have the loss of all the kids on Husky. And the reason I'm saying all this is not to put fear into everyone's heart, although it's probably already there. It's because right now, standing up a new office, I don't know how possible that is. In another time, it probably would have been very possible because we have a governor who's very focused on business and business development, and it's a tremendous argument to make. Doesn't mean we're not going to try, because it's definitely worth setting seeds and getting things started, but I just want to be realistic about the current landscape.
Thank you, Ceci. And as we all know in this room, it takes time to get things done, but we don't give up. We will try and we will keep trying. So thank you, Ceci. Everyone has had a chance to write down their questions. Now we are moving to the Q&A portion of our evening. So we have questions up for us. God bless you. I'll take the questions. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Okay. Ceci, we're starting with you. Do you see opportunities in the near future for Connecticut schools to practice dual language instruction on a widespread basis? If not, what needs to happen to get us there?
Well, I'm going to give you a caveat. I do not sit on education. So I would actually ask Tamu before I would try to answer this. I honestly do not have a handle on K-12 schools.
And thank you. Superintendent Lucero.
So it's complicated, right? It seems easy, right? We hire some bilingual teachers and we put together the program. It's just not that easy. It is difficult alone to find bilingual teachers who are teaching the necessary instruction we need for our ML learners. So when you think about taking that system that's already stressed and stress it some more with some expectations that we're going to run dual language programs, it becomes more complicated. So I won't go into all the reasons because we are working on something in Stanford Public Schools right now, but we know that we have resources that are different than other school districts. So for Stanford to do something like that, it may be a little bit easier, but is it a program that we're going to be able to expand to all the people who are going to want it? It just won't, it's not going to happen.
Thank you, Tamu. We appreciate Tamu, board member of B1C, superintendent of Stanford Public Schools. Julia or David? How can the Connecticut Community College system help in workforce development? Can I take that first, David?
How can NCC help?
The entire system, but yes, NCC. I saw Nancy here.
Well, I know NCC has a culinary program, right? So on that aspect, it has helped. I've had a lot of people come through that program and come to work with us. Even on the high school level, from the technical colleges, from the technical high schools, their programming, I think, could be better than what it is. So if we had, I don't know, I don't even know how to say this. It goes back to second languages, right? If we had more eligibility for people that didn't speak English well to come into those schools and graduate well, we would be a lot better off. just even from a technical standpoint, be great.
Thanks, Sam. Julia, you want to add anything?
Well, this is where I admit that this report was very much a team effort, and this is a bit of a detail that's not my expertise, but I do know that my colleagues might say that in general, community college systems aren't always sensitive to the skills that immigrants come in having and not having. They sometimes assume a certain type of person who's learning there, and that doesn't always fit with someone who might have a strong educational background but lack the English skills, or have some content knowledge but be lacking others. So having more flexibility in sort of the course that you can take through community college could help make it work better for some immigrant students.
Thank you. This question is for Renee. I have a friend whose parents, at least one of whom is undocumented, are self-deporting to Mexico. They have exhausted all legal options. What do you tell families who have no pathway to legal status and are fearful of sudden deportation?
Right, that's the question. That family made that decision to leave, and families are making that decision. I can't imagine being in that position, but I certainly know, and I've helped many people who have been in that position, and it's very difficult. I would support them in their decision. I would make sure they indeed had exhausted all legal pathways and that they had made the decision fully informed, but otherwise I can't do anything.
Thank you. Sobering, but unfortunately the reality of the situation.
I will also say that that's one aspect of our work that is very, very difficult and emotionally draining for all of us. It's hard.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you. We have a lot of workforce questions. Okay. I'm going to actually do this one. This is an interesting one. Julia, on the spot. You mentioned that wage theft is one of the biggest challenges immigrant workers face. From your perspective, what are the most common ways wage theft shows up in Connecticut, and what strategies or protections do you think are more effective to combat?
I'm not sure I can accurately represent the kind of distribution of how this happens. It happens in lots of ways. It happens with people being paid sub-minimum wages. It happens with people being told to show up to work before their work hours start and be kept there after their work hours end. It shows up in people being offered a job and then the conditions of that job change drastically after they work. It's difficult to fully address this. Our labor law enforcement system is based on complaints, and if workers don't feel comfortable complaining, that won't get investigated, and even if they do feel comfortable complaining, there aren't enough inspectors, and that might not end up being investigated. So that's why I was saying earlier, if investigations can be targeted, there's never going to be enough, but if they can be randomized and targeted to employers and industries where there are known high rates of violations, hopefully that could at least eliminate the current atmosphere that some people told us feels like it invites employers to exploit workers because they know that they won't face repercussions. And again, most employers are good employers and they want to treat their workers well, but there are some bad actors that have an outsized impact. So I think that those targeted labor inspections, all of the work that community-based organizations and NGOs are doing to help workers understand what their rights are and what complaint systems there are and how their immigration status does or doesn't play into those systems and what they can safely pursue regardless of status and what they can't can also be helpful.
Thanks, Julia. David, let me know how you feel about this question. How can employers who have labor shortages but also stringent compliance requirements best support workforce development for immigrants, including undocumented folks?
Can't, really. Not on a paid level. Would I allow someone to come in to learn what they need to learn to go somewhere and work? Absolutely, but I can't put them on payroll. So I don't see anybody that would right now either. The whole fear factor piece is making it very, very, very difficult.
Thanks, David.
It's hard.
Okay, last workforce question. Julia, this one's for you, but I'm gonna see, I don't know if Julia or David wants to answer. If people aren't applying for open jobs, does that mean that we should raise wages? Let's talk about the economics here. Otherwise, do we risk taking advantage of immigrants despite our best intentions? Or Ceci, if you want to chime in, please do.
Well, we know that the minimum wage in Connecticut is going up to $16.94 in January. So that alone, when I was talking with a childcare provider today, she was saying how difficult even that is because raising the minimum wage, she's starting to bump up on how much money she's paying her childcare providers in her center. And so it's when she goes and talks to parents about an increase in their fee for the childcare, that to pay for that, to pay for the increase for her workers, she gets tremendous pushback from parents. So it is a feeling everywhere that people are being absolutely just in a fist. And that is across the board in part because of, there's sort of a zeitgeist right now, a collective unconscious of feeling not good. And then there is the component of the tariffs and what that has done to pricing and the fear that people have about pricing down the road. So I'm not really sure how we can how that is going to affect, because we have one of the highest minimum wages in the country.
David, you want to add on?
It creates a crazy environment. It's going to sound weird, but I pay a dishwasher $20 an hour, which was the most entry-level pay scale in our industry, because everyone knows that we can't find the people to work. And we can't find immigrants who will work at minimum wage and do a better job than the people are working at $20 an hour, believe it or not. So it creates this really strange environment. And everyone wonders why, inflation, why are food costs going up? Dishwasher at 20, someone cutting lettuce at 22, 23, $24 an hour. It's just, everything's got to go up.
Thank you. All right, we're going to put a stop to questions because we're running out of time. Okay, so there are two questions that I'm going to ask Ceci, even though one of them is for Renee, and you'll see why. Okay, so Ceci, now we're putting you on the spot again. Is there a chance that Connecticut could make available funding for defense of those facing deportation? First question. Second question, what do you think can be done to protect immigrants during the special session, looking at the recommendations of the report?
Well, one of the things during special session that we're talking about is increasing the Trust Act, because the trust. Now, I agree with you. However, it's up to the governor to call what is going to be addressed in special session. So there is a push to address the Trust Act. I can't guarantee it's going to happen. So I just always want to, lay the groundwork for expectations. Protecting during special session, obviously the Trust Act would be the key. And what was the other
Do
question?
you think that there's any possibility of funding for immigration legal services? Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. I think it goes back to what you had said, is in part, it is very difficult even to find the lawyers to be able to do this work. So, and again, funding. I'm a realist. I really am. And I just don't know in special session if we're going to be able to find any money when every single issue in front of us is going to require a tremendous amount of money.
Well, thank you, Ceci. And Ceci is a realist, but we're going to end with optimism. So I'm going to ask each panel member, in reading the report and its recommendations, what's something that you want to leave with today that you feel hopeful that we can accomplish here in Connecticut? Julia?
You want me to start? Yeah. Well, I hope, having contributed to writing the recommendations, that all of them are carried forward, of course. But I actually wanted to say something a little bit broader, which is just that I think that there's so much potential here in Connecticut. There's the will, there's a strong community of nonprofit organizations, there's a strong community of advocates, there's vision, there's the politics that can work, and there's state leaders who seem like they could be pushed if there's enough pressure to think more about immigrants. And I'm really hopeful, as I said at the beginning, that Connecticut can present a different vision of how immigrants fit into our communities, our cities, our states, the country. States have always been policy laboratories in the United States, and that is more important now than ever before with all of the federal policy changes that we're seeing. Connecticut has led in the past. New Haven had the first municipal ID for immigrants. Connecticut has the Trust Act. You've expanded Husky to immigrant kids. There's a lot here, and I think Connecticut can lead again and push the country forward. So this environment really gives the opportunity for Connecticut to take up that leadership, to show that investing in immigrant families is good not just for those families, but for our communities overall, and that strong communities are built partly on having strong immigrant families who have the support that they need. And this state response could be not just responding to federal action. Connecticut is doing that in all kinds of ways right now. But there are some lower profile issues, some of the really fundamental supports in early care and education and K through 12 education and helping adult learners that won't be so political, won't be so high profile, but can really matter in strengthening immigrant families. So I come from DC, I feel disenfranchised, I feel occupied, and I take a lot of hope from Connecticut. And so I just really hope that you all will consider the recommendations and keep pushing.
Thank you, Julia.
So I said I was a realist, and I tried to maybe throw a little bit of cold water on expectations. But I'm also a cockeyed optimist, and I always see the glass as half full. And as soon as I think of something that I think I can get accomplished, I hold on to it and make it happen. So the idea of the Office of Immigrants is a fantastic idea. I'm so glad you brought it up tonight. And also, I voted for the Trust Act. I voted for Husky for Immigrants. I am always going to be up there with my voice, and my expectation is that Connecticut will continue to lead with what we're doing in early child care, with the work that we're doing with the providers, and helping the people who I saw up in Hartford and who came out continuously to advocate. I will be working with them and working to make all of the things we're talking about here, try to make them happen.
Thank you, Ceci. David.
I'm an optimist and a romantic. So, hopeless. I truly believe that community, especially B1C, right, showing the way on how we treat this situation and how we have for years. More of that will expand just from the number of people in this room, and I've been to the breakfasts, and it's just overwhelming, right, what people will do. So between that and my family business is 100 years old, and my grandfather came over as an immigrant and brought his wife and 5 kids over 5 years later. So I see that still happening. The immigrants that I know are they're down, but they're still grinding. You know, they're going. And it's from this whole country. I know Connecticut, a lot of businesses have been built on the backs of immigrants. And I don't think that's ever going to stop in this country. It's just going to keep on going. So grind, push hard, and everybody help each other out, and we're going to get there.
Okay. So in case anybody's wondering how they can get involved, so how each and every one of you and us can engage with the report findings and recommendations, I have a few ideas for you. So first, read the report and find a recommendation you can carry forward in your work and or in your community. Reach out to your municipal leaders and state legislators and share the report. Support local immigrant-owned businesses in Stamford and throughout Fairfield County. Get connected to local groups doing rapid response, safe passage to school or medical providers, court accompaniment, or advocacy. Support B1C and the important and impactful work it is doing in the community. As you have heard this evening, what we as individuals, our state government, and other institutions and groups do here in Connecticut really matters in the lives of real people and has the potential to make a profound impact. We need all hands on deck right now. My hope is that we as a state can carry forward some of the report's recommendations now and into the future. Last but not least, a huge thanks to our incredible panelists for their time and contributions tonight, and to E1C for hosting this important conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much to you, Mirellise. This was wonderful, and thank you so much to our panelists for sharing their thoughts and their hearts with us tonight. Thank you for being here. To close the evening, I want to thank the Orchestra Lumos for the beautiful music that you heard while you were having the cocktails, and the chaplains for their support with the parking as well. And also to Maria Esquivel, our own Mexican-American immigrant that is with the culinary graduate and that featured the shrimp taquitos that David mentioned. If you didn't know this, today is Mexico's Independence Day. So, a few housekeeping reminders. Please return your name badge as you leave. Check your phones for a text message or email if you want an action item. Pick it up at the silent auction area before you exit so our development team doesn't have to follow you around later. And also check your seats. Be sure you're not leaving any personal property. Glasses can get expensive, and we have recovered some over the years. So as we move forward, I want to invite each one of you to invite join our Vita work. And just as importantly, speak to your friends and colleagues about us, and then your networks. Share our mission and the impact we strive to make. Enlist their support because our strength grows as our community grows. As time becomes more challenging, it will be you and them and us all together who will keep the community strong and united. Your involvement is not just appreciated, but it is essential. Thank you again for your presence, your partnership, your support, your commitment to building a more hopeful, resilient, and inclusive future for all. Have a fantastic evening.